Hello, everybody. It's CJ Miller. I'm going to do something a little different. Uh, Behind me, I'm just going to let this run in the background as we talk. Uh, it's CJ Miller. I'm in Shreveport, and I'm talking about American Horror Story. And this is the final night of season 11. And what they've been doing, if you're a fan of the show, you know they're doing something different. They've been doing each week. They've been showing two episodes back to back. Interesting. So, um, yeah, and this aired Wednesday, and yeah, and of course, we're doing this on Hulu here. So, I, you know, I wanted to really like this episode. I mean, this season. I think it's probably one of the better produced seasons. It's straightforward. It plays out like a crime drama, and then there's a little bit of a mysticism uh, going on with it. You know, what can I say? I really want to like it. The problem is, uh, uh, I don't like this story. I don't like this story because what could have been a supernatural horror story, and if you want to include elements of characters who have a mysterious virus, which is, as we're learning, is HIV, and this is when they're just realizing uh, that there's something going on, or they haven't even necessarily uh, zeroed in on why the illness, but these characters are getting sick and dying, usually of pneumonia because they have like a you know an immune deficiency that they don't understand. Uh, I don't know. It's like, okay, so it's American Horror Story, and yes, this was something that was a horror. Uh, and I think everybody who has just dealt with this pandemic, and especially those who lived in populated areas and knew how fast that COVID-19 could spread before we had antibodies, and if you got sick, maybe you were going to get really really sick, and if you were compromised, maybe you would die. But we were also seeing young people die from it too, and it was and it's now that we have antibodies, it's not, we forget maybe how quick we forget uh, that COVID-19 scared a lot of people. But maybe if you remember that, then you maybe can relate to the experience of being someone who is maybe part of the at-risk, you know, where anyone was. And we forget about that, how risky uh, you know, HIV was sexually transmitted uh, from anybody. And if you were more sexually active, and typically you take a young man and you give him access to uh, sex, he's going to be sexually active. And yeah, so yeah, and they you take young men and you put them in a room full of other young men who are attracted to young men and everything. There's going to be sex going on, and it's not a morality thing. But they did try to make it that. They did try to make it that. But that's nothing new. History's been doing that since there's been history. The fact of the matter is, it's not. This HIV thing did not uh, target gay men. It just showed up in that community uh, first, because uh, yeah, because of sex. But uh, yeah, no, very soon after it emerged, right after it emerged in that community, then it started to emerge in uh, other communities. Um, or subsections of the population and everything. And you find out that it's not about a morality thing. It's about uh, an opportunistic thing. This virus, which we learned was a virus, would thrive anywhere that uh, that it had the opportunity to, and it provided a pathway for other opportunistic diseases because it wasn't the HIV uh, virus itself uh, that ended up killing people. It was the other diseases that took advantage of the uh, lack of an immune system when it was going on that it would happen. But anyway, so how about that? People uh, really don't die directly from AIDS, even though HIV is a retroactive virus and can be responsible for cancer. Most of the symptoms were most of the deaths were caused by secondary diseases uh, and not directly uh, HIV. So it's I think that's why I really just didn't like this season because it was so early on that it's really focusing on uh, the men, and it was a horror, but it's not. Um, it's not. It's not a supernatural horror story. It's they're bringing in little elements of the supernatural, but it's symbolic. You know, the closest thing to the closest thing to the supernatural that's happened so far in this season is that there have been people who have had premonition, uh, intuition about something coming, and then there is a figure in leather bar gear running around stalking people. But it turns out that is primarily symbolic of uh, that character is symbolic of uh, the disease that's going rampant. That's chasing after these people, and they're symbolically running. But it's not really. This is not really a supernatural story, and that more than anything is why I'm not loving this season of American Horror Story, because what really attracts me to American Horror Story each season is when there are elements of the supernatural. And any of the supernatural elements in this season, they're cursory and they're there symbolically and they're not actually really happening other than you know, Sandra Bernhardt's character is a newly discovered medium and everything. So you see, I mean, they're showing some of what it might have been like for those people to actually have advanced HIV disease, but it's still doing a disservice because it was brutal. If you wanna see uh, some realistic portrayal of what it can be like, uh, check out Angels in America, which is uh, it's available for streaming all over the place, especially if you're HBO Max or something like that. But before I was a HBO Max subscriber, I bought it on the Vudu app. And then what else? What else? And the band played on, although it doesn't portray it quite as brutally as Angels in America. Um, it's a touching situation for me because I came of age in the '80s, and I remember it when I went to sixth grade. They talked about this new thing. Like a few months ago over the summer, it was uh, herpes. Everybody be aware of herpes. It was gonna get you. And this, I'm like 8, 9 years old, and hey, herpes, be careful, you know, and then, but it turned out the reason why that was suddenly a topic was because there was also the uh, HIV, which people had not identified yet, but they were starting to notice it, even as far south as in Louisiana and everything. And it was just kind of like um, they didn't. Uh, anyway, they did. The test that they use for I think it was I think it was a test. I can't remember if it was a syphilis test or if it was a herpes test, but one of those to test to see uh, uh, if you were positive for that. Uh, and it may have been anyway. It turned out to be a useful test to also test if carriers had the HIV. Reactionary. I don't know exactly how it was, but it was like it was useful in testing, and they were able to start tracing lineage of HIV as it transmitted from person to person. But um, well, I remember being in sixth grade. We heard about that the all of a sudden these you know VD was a big deal. And then all of a sudden, it was like now we're identifying uh, AIDS and not quite knowing it was a acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And I think by that point they had uh, noted that it was a virus, but there was no that things were known about it by that point, but nobody was talking publicly about it because other than hey, be careful and don't have sex in sixth grade, who the hell, then then nothing that we heard about it for for a couple of weeks, and it was just, and then all of a sudden nothing, and then people just stopped talking about it until it started to affect uh, just across the board, just everybody, people, just left and right, and it was not just a abnormality within gay people, and they knew specifically that it was sexually transmitted. And I don't know why people got mad at gay people anyway about it. If you want to be mad about it, be mad at the fucking bisexual people. They're the ones that brought it from the gay. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. Turns out, a lot of it, any sort of uh, body blood, uh, milk, to you know, uh, yeah, various types. It turns, tears did not transmit, uh, and saliva didn't transmit. So if you were kissing someone and you accidentally swapped some spit, you weren't gonna get it, and so it's like, I don't know. I think this story is kind of like, okay, it's kind of like reliving all this, as a gay person, as a young gay, yeah, I was coming into my right as I was coming into my sexual prime. I really had to be careful about that because I didn't want to have, I didn't want to contract HIV. So I really played it safe. I had my fun, I had my life, I had my enjoyment, but there was always a, hey, well, I have to be a little careful about this, uh, as people should anyway. But this was a little different because there wasn't a cure, and it was probably going to kill you if you got it. Uh, in the and then maybe sometime in, if you had to already have it, before you could get any sort of treatment, obviously. But maybe you weren't going to be able to afford treatment, you know, because it was a fight just to get the medication that could suppress HIV and kind of hold it down. The THZ and the other types of medication, you couldn't get. It was a battle just to be able to have insurance cover those medications. Uh, as a matter of fact, you were not going to get uh, any sort of coverage as far as anything like that until you had advanced HIV disease. Back then, it was called AIDS. Which was they named it AIDS when they didn't quite understand or they hadn't quite identified the virus that was causing it. Also, it was still a syndrome versus a specific causality so I don't know. And then having to think back to when we knew so little and there were so few treatments. It was a horror story. But so this is a true life American horror story. And that's kind of why I'm not digging this. I really wish uh, if he were going to do this, Ryan Murphy, he could do it as he did, The Normal Heart, which addressed with through HBO, The Normal Heart. It was a movie or miniseries, and Julia Roberts and some, it really it addressed HIV from a different standpoint. This is kind of like early on when it was just terrifying, and it was to be a gay person. For me, I was like a gay person, and I knew there was treatment should the worst happen, but I knew that there was prevention, and I had the education. But could you imagine not knowing uh, what was going to cause it or whatever, how scary it might have been? I think that's kind of what they're wanting to address here, but, you know, I don't know. It's because it's a real life, even though these are fake characters, these are real life situations that were going on, and anything, and it's being told through allegory. Uh, it's like, well, you kind of did a flip flop. Right? We started getting a various killers, two or three storylines stalking gay men in the 80s, and then there was the virus, but I wasn't quite sure if they were going to address if it was going to be HIV that they were addressing or not, because they started to tell the story of a virus that was wiping out deer in Fire Island, and then they went in theory, did this virus jump from the deer in Fire Island to cross over to humans, and if so, why gay men? If I mean, do gay men go fucking hunting for deer and fire? I don't. So it was kind of threw me for a second, but I think that's where they're going with it. Uh, and I thought at first maybe that wouldn't be the case, except for one of the characters died last week, and he was carried away by uh, young boys who have not young boys but young men who were wearing antlers and deers and everything like that. So that was like, yeah, they're making a case, and it's that, like I said, it's allegorical, and it's probably more kind than some of the many theories. Now this is supposed to be the character that is the leather daddy that was stalking the people without his mask, to see how beautiful he is and everything like that. But he's also not the same guy, because his stature clearly is not the same as that. So um, yeah, how weird. I really think I would have liked to have seen this be a lot more horrific, like in the supernatural vein. I would have liked there to be more supernatural. Instead, it just turned into turned into any number of gay themed movies that were set in the 80s and 90s about characters who were dying of AIDS, uh, advanced HIVs. And it just seemed like, is this the only thing? The play Rent, is there any other story about gay people that we can tell other than HIV? Especially now, because yes, you can. It's still a thing, and yes, you can still catch it, but there are ways to prevent it more now, so than ever. And if we took those precautions, we actually could probably eliminate it uh, from our thing. If you have medication that can really suppress it for the people that have it, uh, and then double down on other, prophylactics and safer practices and things like that. Not that you have to be a Puritan and don't have fun and everything like that, but you know what I mean. Like, just really be careful. Then you don't have to, I mean, in no time at all, the spread of HIV uh, could stop. And yeah, and if it's got nowhere to go, then it will die. You know, uh, as people die from natural uh, lifespans, because there's medication that can render it'll still be in your system, but just not effective. There are some theories that you can suppress it uh, and keep it, you know, uh, at a zero count, even though zero doesn't necessarily mean not non-detectable, doesn't necessarily mean not present. But there are some theories that if you go say 20-25 years or so without the disease being able to replicate in the body because it's being suppressed, then maybe that there's a cleansing or purification uh, that you know maybe you can consider yourself cured or whatever. I don't think we haven't had enough time to explore that theory. Uh, I know there were some experiments or some reports about bone marrow, like bone marrow transplants, uh, can be an effective uh, cure, but I don't know how valid those reports are. But I used to read reports. Uh, person with HIV have a bone marrow transplant, and so the new bone marrow is not producing contaminated. But I don't know how just replacing the bone marrow would alleviate the HIV from the tissues and the blood that's already in the body. So I don't know how uh, a simple bone marrow transplant would be a cure. But so I always questioned those reports. Um, anyway, so this is just, I don't want to forget about HIV in the world, and I don't want, especially young people who are really in their prime of exploration and everything. I don't want them to ignore the risk, but also it's just not a comfortable topic for me. So, and I'm not like horrified. I just feel like maybe it would. It's more of this is more of a docudrama, and this is not the story that I love to get from American Horror Story, where every other season, uh, that you're being entertained and you're being taken away from your world, and you're given a story of fictional characters having fictional, such a fantastic uh, and non-plausible horror story, with the exception of season 7 Cult. They went a little real with that too because that was a political story. So, although the idea of a cult actually becoming taken over an entire, you know, town and everything like that was maybe a little far fetched, but I was able to separate some reality. But this is just a little too. It's a little too on the nose for comfort, because it really did happen, and they're not playing it for exploitation. Although it might be a little bit exploitive, but I also feel like it's an interesting topic uh, that should still be discussed for the sake of a healthier uh, people at large within the world. So, so I don't mind. One thing about Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk is that they're not afraid to talk about topics in their programs that that other programs don't want to talk about. You know, but when you have programs like Rescue 911 or what's no, I think it's just 911. Some of the other things that some of the other shows would have been far more appropriate, and then I could get back to the fun of the horror. So I hope that they remember that next season. Well, I don't mind this, and the whole idea is that an anthology, every season is an anthology, and therefore every season you want to be different, and you want to tell a different story and a different tone and everything like that. That's great, but I also think if you're going to talk about HIV and really what it meant to the world, especially early on like this, it could have been done better service as another